Welcome to AI Tech Book. This is the Atlas, Episode 5, Prompt Engineering and Structured Output. If you watched Part 4, you know what the developer configures. 7 extension points, 1 orchestration plane. But the protocol stops. The configuration stops. What's left when the model is about to run is the words. The prompt is to the model what assembly is to the CPU, the lowest layer the developer touches before the model runs. 8 authoring surfaces compose every Claude request, and the most important one isn't a parameter. It's a contract. The contract is the doctrine. 3 named misuses at production scale. Team shipping JSON output by asking the model nicely and watching it hallucinate the closing brace. Teams reaching for the response format parameter they read about in OpenAI tutorials and getting a 400 error because that parameter does not exist on Anthropic. Teams setting a manual thinking budget on the current generation of Claude models and getting another 400. 3 patterns. 1 root cause. The contract was assumed instead of authored. Anthropic does not ship prompt engineering as a grab bag of techniques. They ship it as a doctrine, 1 entry point page, 1 analogy, 5 principles. Every advanced surface in this episode traces back to it. The doctrine is 1 sentence. Claude responds well to clear, explicit instructions. The brilliant new employee framing is the analogical anchor, a smart new hire who lacks context on your norms and workflows. From that anchor, 5 principles cascade. 1. Be clear and direct. 2. Use 3 to 5 examples. 3. Structure with XML tags. 4. Give Claude a role via system prompt. 5. Add context, explain why. Verbatim Anthropic, your response will be read aloud by a text-to-speech engine outperforms. Never use ellipses, because the explanation lets Claude generalize. The golden rule of clarity is empirical, not metaphorical. Show your prompt to a colleague with minimal context on the task. Ask them to follow it. If they would be confused, Claude will be too. And the inverse rule, which most teams miss. Tell Claude what to do, not what not to do. Instead of do not use Markdown, try your response should be composed of smoothly flowing prose paragraphs. Positive framing generalizes. Negative framing is brittle. If you're an architect, the doctrine is the design surface. Every prompt your team authors traces back to one of the 5 principles. Most prompts fail, not because the model is bad, but because the prompt assumes context the model does not have. 3 authoring surfaces ship on the Messages API today. A 4th surface shipped on every prior model. On the current generation of Claude models, that 4th surface is gone. If your prompts still use it, they 400. 3 live surfaces. 1. The system prompt. Set via the top-level system parameter on the Messages API. Either a string or an array of text block param. Sets role, tone, scope, Anthropic. Even a single sentence in the system prompt makes a difference. 2. User messages. The messages array carries user and assistant turns. Note, consecutive same role turns are automatically combined into a single turn. 3. Few shot examples. Anthropic's recommended count is 3 to 5. Wrap each in example tags inside an example's parent. Examples must be relevant, diverse, structured. Watch what happened to the 4th. Prefilling the assistant message. The technique where you put the opening characters of the desired response into a final assistant turn before sending is deprecated. On the current generation of Claude models, prefilled responses on the last assistant turn are no longer supported. The API returns 400. 3 migration paths replace it. For JSON format constraint, use structured outputs covered in scene 8. For preamble suppression, add a system prompt directive, respond directly without preamble. For resume cases, move the continuation text into the user message. And the literal interpretation rule. Verbatim Anthropic, the newest Claude models interpret prompts more literally and explicitly than the prior generation, particularly at lower effort levels. They will not silently generalize an instruction from one item to another and will not infer requests you did not make. The remedy, state scope explicitly. Apply this formatting to every section, not just the first one. The new model rewards verbosity at the prompt level. If you're a developer, the audit is short. Grep your code base for role::assistant in the last position before send. Every match is a prefill that 400s on the new models. Replace it with structured outputs if it was forcing JSON. Replace it with a system prompt directive if it was suppressing preamble. The migration is mechanical. Episode 2 taught the tool use loop, the 4 fields, the stop reason, the result block. Episode 2's job was the mechanics. Episode 5's job is to name what those 4 fields actually are. The doctrine layer no other vendor ships the same way. The tool use object on the Anthropic Messages API ships 4 fields. Name, the function the model will call. Description, natural language guidance for the model on when to call it. Input schema, a JSON schema object describing the arguments. And the optional 4th, strict:_true. Verbatim from the tool use docs, add strict:_true to your tool definitions to ensure Claude's tool calls always match your schema exactly. Strict went general availability on January 29, 2026, the same day structured outputs hit GA tool. Use itself went GA across Claude API, Bedrock, and Vertex on May 30, 2024. The contract is 2 years old. The strict mode is 4 months old. Watch what the contract actually does. When Claude calls a tool, the response block carries type_tool_use, an opaque tool u_ID, the name field matching your tool definition, and an input object that conforms to the schema. The stop reason becomes tool_use. With strict:_true, the input object is constrained at decode time, not asked nicely, not validated after the fact, constrained at decode. The model cannot emit JSON that violates the schema. The 4 fields are the contract. The contract is the doctrine, and the boundary condition, the tool_choice parameter. 4 options. Auto. Claude decides whether to call a tool. Any. Claude must call at least one tool. Tool. Claude must call this specific name tool. None. No tools. Plain text response. Plus an optional flag, tool_choice.disable_parallel_tool_use. The system prompt overhead for tool definitions is identical across the current Claude model generation, 346 tokens for auto or none, 313 tokens for any or tool. If you're a developer, the design rule is simple. Pick auto when the model should decide. Pick any when you want guaranteed tool invocation, but the model picks which one. Pick a name tool when the contract requires a specific shape. Pick none when you want the model to ignore tools entirely. And for parameter omissions, Opus is much more likely to recognize a missing required parameter and ask. Sonnet may infer. Markdown is a popular prompt format. JSON is a popular structured output format. The format Anthropic actually built Claude to parse is neither, and it shows up in every advanced pattern in the docs. Verbatim from the best practices page, XML tags help Claude parse complex prompts unambiguously, especially when your prompt mixes instructions, context, examples, and variable inputs. 6 canonical tags ship by convention: instructions, context, input, example or examples, documents, with nested document and document content and source, quotes, and info. Use consistent descriptive tag names. Nest when content has natural hierarchy. The multi-document pattern is the highest leverage one, documents wrapping each document with an index attribute and a source label. The long context grounding pattern is where this earns its keep. The Anthropic recommendation for long document tasks asks Claude to quote relevant parts of the documents first, before carrying out the task. Place these in quotes tags. Then, based on those quotes, list all information and place diagnostic content in info tags. The quote first, then act pattern is the load-bearing technique behind every long context production prompt. The XML tags are not decoration. They are the grammar that makes the model's reasoning auditable. And the context-aware extension, the current Sonnet and Haiku generations receive token budget signals via XML tags at conversation start. Budget:_token_budget. And system_warning tags after each tool call, with the running token count. The same grammar that structures input also structures the system's own self-awareness. If you're a developer, the rule is prefer XML tags when your prompt has more than one type of content. Instructions plus context plus examples plus variable inputs is 4 types. The tags are the parsing contract. The model does not have to guess where one section ends and another begins. You've seen the doctrine. You've seen the contract. Now, the surfaces that change cost and latency at production scale. Subscribe to AI Tech Book, the Atlas. Prompt engineering architecture for teams building with Claude. Same depth, same playbook, episode 6, previewed at the end. Extended thinking is next. Adaptive on the current models. The manual path was removed on the new generation. Watch the difference. Extended thinking lets Claude reason before answering. 2 ways to invoke it shipped through 2025. On the current generation of Claude models, one of them is gone. Manual budget, 400 error. Adaptive is the only path. 3 thinking config shape ship on the messages API. Type enabled with budget underscore tokens in display. Manual mode, deprecated. Type disabled, no thinking. Type adaptive with display. Claude allocates the budget dynamically based on task complexity. On the current generation, only adaptive works. Verbatim from the extended thinking docs, manual extended thinking is no longer supported and returns a 400 error. Must use adaptive thinking instead. Manual remains deprecated but functional on the prior Opus and Sonnet generation. Adaptive is recommended on every model that supports it. Watch the effort parameter. Effort went GA on the prior Opus on February 5th, 2026, replacing budget underscore tokens for depth control on the new models. 5 levels, low, medium, high, X high, max. Verbatim Anthropic guidance for the current Opus. Start with the new X high effort level for coding and agentic use cases, and use a minimum of high effort for most intelligent sensitive use cases. Effort is how you control thinking depth without picking a token count. The model picks the count from the depth. And the billing rule, verbatim. You're charged for the full thinking tokens generated by the original request, not the summary tokens. Display omitted reduces latency, not cost. The thinking tokens are billed even when you do not see them. And the context window rule, previous thinking blocks are automatically stripped from the context window calculation. They do not accumulate across turns. Except, verbatim, the extended thinking block must be returned with the corresponding tool results. This is the only case where you have to return thinking blocks. If you're a technical PM, the cost shape lesson is thinking changes latency, not just intelligence. The X high and max levels can spin for minutes on complex tasks. Verbatim Anthropic, set a large max output token budget so the model has room to think and act. They recommend starting at 64K tokens. Budget for thinking the same way you budget for output. Most online tutorials about Claude structured output are wrong. They tell you to use response underscore format with type JSON underscore schema. That parameter does not exist on the Anthropic Messages API. The team that copy-pastes from an OpenAI tutorial gets a silent ignored field and then gets parsing errors 3 months into production. This is Anthropic's contract, not OpenAI's. The contract is the doctrine. Structured outputs is Anthropic's GA path for guaranteed shape JSON responses. The canonical request shape, output underscore config colon, format colon, type colon, JSON underscore schema, comma, schema colon, your schema. No beta header required since January 29th, 2026, GA day. Public beta launched November 14th, 2025 under the structured outputs 2025-11-13 header. Haiku 4.5 was added December 4th. Verbatim, structured outputs guarantee schema compliant responses through constrained decoding. Constrained at decode time. Not validated after the fact. Watch the 3 Anthropic stated guarantees. Always valid, no more JSON.parse errors. Type safe, guaranteed field types and required fields. Reliable, no retries needed for schema violations. The supported JSON schema features basic types, enum on primitives, const, neo fall off, ref and def, default, required, additional properties false, formats including datetime, and URI and UUIDC. Schema limits, max 20 strict tools per request, max 24 optional parameters, max 16 parameters with union types, compilation timeout 180 seconds. Unsupported recursive schemas, minimum and maximum, min length and max length, additional properties not equal to false. Anthropic frames structured outputs as 2 surfaces, JSON outputs for freeform structured response or strict tool use for tool inputs. Same contract layer, 2 angles. And the Anthropic recommendation, verbatim. If you need Claude to always output valid JSON that conforms to a specific schema, use structured outputs instead of the prompt engineering techniques below. The old prompt-only fallback, precisely defining the format in the prompt itself, still works on older models, but the GA path is the doctrine. The contract is the doctrine. If you're a developer migrating from the prefill pattern that was deprecated in Scene 3, structured outputs is the official migration target. Same intent, guaranteed JSON shape, different surface. The schema lives in your code. The model emits exact compliance. No retry logic. No JSON.parse error handler. The contract is enforced by the API. Caching is the surface that changes the math on every other surface. Repeating a system prompt across 1,000 requests without caching costs 1,000 times. With caching, once, plus a 10% read fee. Anthropic claims up to 90% cost reduction. The worked example in their own docs shows 92% on a 100,000 token prefix. Canonical syntax, cache control : type : ephemeral attached to any cacheable content block. Default TTL, 5 minutes. Extended TTL, 1 hour via TTL:1H, GA since August 13th, 2025. Cache rate multipliers, 5-minute write is 1.25 times base input price. 1 hour write is 2 times. Cache read multiplier, 0.1 times. 90% off on hits. Maximum explicit breakpoints per request. 4. Look back window, 20 blocks per breakpoint. Cacheable content types, tool definitions, system content blocks, text and user and assistant messages, images and documents, tool use and tool result blocks. Minimum prompt length to cache, 4,096 tokens on the current Opus and Haiku generation. 1,024 tokens on the current Sonnet generation. Watch the automatic caching beat. February 19th, 2026. Verbatim Anthropic. Add a single cache control field to your request body, and the system automatically caches the last cacheable block, moving the cache point forward as conversations grow. 1 field. The system manages the breakpoints. Automatic caching uses one of the 4 slots, leaving 3 for manual placement. The cost reduction worked example. 100,000 token cache prefix at current Opus pricing. First write, 62.5 cents on the 5-minute tier. Every subsequent read within 5 minutes, 5 cents. 92% per request savings. And the cache invalidation hierarchy. Tools change invalidates tools plus system plus messages. System change invalidates system plus messages. Messages change invalidates only messages. The hierarchy is top down. Change the most volatile thing last in your request body, the most stable thing first. And the isolation rule, as of February 5th, 2026, Claude API uses workspace level cache isolation. Different organizations never share caches, even with identical prompts. If you're a technical PM, the cost shape lesson is caching turns repeated prompts into a fixed cost. The system prompt every request shares 1 write, many reads. The long context document re-referenced, same. The tool definitions array, same. Architect the request body so the most reused content is at the top. The breakpoint discipline is the cost discipline. 1 million tokens went GA on the prior Opus and Sonnet generation on March 13th, 2026. No beta header. Anthropic also retired the previous 1 million beta on Sonnet 4.5 and Sonnet 4. That header now returns an error. The capacity surface changed. The discipline around where to put the query did not. Verbatim, the current Mythos preview, the current Opus, the prior Opus, and the prior Sonnet generation have a 1 million token context window. Every other current model, including Sonnet 4.5 and Sonnet 4, has 200,000. The 1 million GA went standard pricing on March 13th, 2026. Verbatim, requests over 200K tokens work automatically for these models, with no beta header required. The old Context 1M 2025-0807 beta header was retired on Sonnet 4.5 and Sonnet 4 on April 30th. The header has no effect on these models, and requests exceeding the standard 200K context window return an error. Watch the placement rule. Verbatim Anthropic, queries at the end can improve response quality by up to 30% in tests, especially with complex, multi-document inputs, long-form data at the top of the prompt. Query at the bottom. The rule is empirical, not theoretical. Anthropic A/B tested it. And the long document grounding rule, for long document tasks, ask Claude to quote relevant parts of the documents first, before carrying out the task. Place quotes in quotes tags. The XML grammar from Scene 5 is the long context tool. And the context rot warning, verbatim, As token count grows, accuracy and recall degrade, a phenomenon known as context rot. This makes curating what's in context just as important as how much space is available. 1 million tokens is not a license to dump. The capacity is real. The signal-to-noise penalty is also real. And the context awareness feature, the current sine, the prior sine, and the current haiku track the remaining context window throughout a conversation and use that signal in their reasoning. The model knows its budget. Use that. If you're an architect, the long context discipline is capacity is not quality. Curate ruthlessly. Put documents at the top. Put queries at the bottom. Use XML grounding. Use the quote first pattern. The 30% quality lift is a Pareto pickup. The cheapest improvement you can make once your prompts already use caching. Words are one input. Pixels are another. PDF pages are a third. Multimodal is its own surface, with its own caps, its own token formula, and one upgrade the current Opus brought that prior models did not have. Supported image formats, JPEG, PNG, GIF, WebP, 3 source types, base 64 in line, URL since February 27, 2025, and file via the files API tie. Per request limits, 100 images per request on 200K context models, 600 per request on 1 million context models, raised from 100 to 600 on March 13, 2026. Maximum image file size, 5 megabytes per image on API. Maximum dimensions, 8,000 by 8,000 pixels, reduced to 2,000 by 2,000 when more than 20 images per request. Token formula, width times height divided by 750. PDF support when GA December 17, 2024. URL-based PDFs added February 27, 2025. Same per request caps as images. Verbatim, the current Opus is the first Claude model with high-resolution image support. The maximum image resolution is 2,576 pixels on the long edge, up from 1,568 pixels on prior models. 3 times the native resolution cap before resize. 3 times the per-image token cost, 4,784 tokens versus 1,568 at max resolution. If you're a developer working with documents, the files API is the cost optimization. Upload once. Reference many. Multi-turn payload stays small. The image bytes do not re-serialize on every request. Caching plus files API plus multimodal is the production stack. Theory ends here. One named scale number, one named source, one honest caveat about how it was reported. Per Anthropic's own prompt caching documentation, verbatim, 100,000 token catch prefix at current Opus pricing costs 62.5 cents on the first 5-minute write. Every subsequent read within the TTL costs 5 cents. Per request savings, 92%. This is Anthropic published, not press estimate. The original prompt catching beta launch in August 2024 advertised, verbatim, up to 80% latency reduction and up to 90% cost reduction. 2 cost shape stats, both vendor canonical. The market scale numbers you'll see in industry coverage. Claude API revenue, enterprise adoption percentages named customer rollouts. Those are press estimates and they shift quarter to quarter. The cost shape math you can rely on is in the Anthropic docs. 90% off on cache reads is the worked example. The 30% quality lift on query at end placement is the worked claim. The 80% latency reduction is the original beta advertisement. Anchor on the docs. Verify press numbers before they appear in a board deck. And the operational shape underneath the numbers. Every team running Claude at scale composes the same surfaces this episode taught. System and user and few shot for authoring. XML for grammar. Tool use for field for action contract. Structured outputs for response contract. Extended thinking for reasoning depth. Caching for cost shape. Long context for capacity. Multimodal for non-text. 8 surfaces. 1 doctrine. The contract is the doctrine. If you're a technical PM, the procurement case for Claude's prompt engineering stack is the 8-surface composition. Every surface maps to one production discipline: clarity, structure, action, response, depth, cost, capacity, modality. The docs ship the math. The architecture ships the doctrine. 8 authoring surfaces from one episode. 1. The Anthropic doctrine. Be clear and direct. Treat Claude like a brilliant new employee. 5 principles. 1 golden rule. Read your prompt to a colleague cold. 2. 3 live surfaces. System, user, few shot. The 4th, prefill, was deprecated on the current generation of Claude models. It 400s. Migrate to structured outputs or to a system prompt directive. 3. The tool use 4-field contract. Name, description, input schema, strict. The contract is the doctrine. Strict went GA on January 29, 2026. 4. XML structure. Documents, document, quotes, info. The canonical Anthropic grammar. Quote first then act is the long context production pattern. 5. Extended thinking. Adaptive on the current generation. Manual rejected. Effort levels low through max. Thinking tokens are billed even when display is omitted. 6. Structured outputs. Output underscore config dot format with type JSON underscore schema. GA January 29, 2026. Response underscore format does not exist on Anthropic. The contract is the doctrine. 7. Prompt catching. Cache underscore control breakpoints. 4 max. 5 minute and 1 hour. TTL 90% read discount. Automatic catching since February 19, 2026. 8. 1 million tokens on the prior Opus and Sonnet generation. No beta header since March 13th. Queries at the end. Context rot is real. 600 images per request on 1 million context models. Architecture is what you write. 8 authoring surfaces. 1 doctrine. The contract is the doctrine. Thank you for watching. Share it with one person. Subscribe to AI Tech Book for episode 6. Context engineering and reliability. Prompts compose the model. Context composes the conversation. Reliability is what you build on top.